So, this would be episode 2 of what I call Robostoph's FireSide Book Chat. The whole purpose of this podcast is just to kind of share and, celebrate the love of reading and writing. So my intent with the whole podcast is to bring on not just authors, but bookstore owners and, book enthusiasts, collectors, and things of that nature. Because my general belief is as long as you are reading, you always have something to talk about. And I have found that to be pretty true. So I'm excited to introduce Professor Cassandra O'Sullivan Sachar onto the little podcast here. And she is has a pretty prolific educational background here, it looks like. But I'll let her introduce herself here. So you can go ahead and just tell us, who you are.
Sure. Hi, my name is Cassandra. So you almost got that right, Chris. Got the other names right. So 2 out of 3 is pretty good. My name is long. It's a long name. 2 out of 3 are hard to pronounce. So I'm always correcting people and letting them know, hey, it's Cassandra Sachar.
I even asked you, and I still messed it up. But
it's okay. Everybody does. And so I am here. I wear a few different hats in terms of horror because I am a horror and suspense writer. I am a horror scholar, and I also, this part I think is very cool and just something new in the last 6 months or so, I also teach a horror writing class at my university, along with a bunch of composition classes and a regular creative writing class and class for future teachers. So I do a lot of teaching and reading and writing and a lot that has to do with horror. So it's a lot of fun, and I use different parts of my brain, but I guess a lot of parts of my brain gravitate towards scary because that is what I'm into.
Right.
So that's a little bit about me.
Excellent. And it looks like you've recently released a book, and I have darkness there, but something more. I got that right? Am I close here? There we go. She's got it right in front of us.
It's mysteriously floating across the screen.
Right.
And there is Raven on the cover in homage to Edgar Allan Poe, because my main character is an Edgar Allan Poe scholar and an English professor. Gee, I don't know where I came up with that second part.
Sorry, self-insert there. That's okay.
Yes. Hey, it's a career that I know well.
Right.
Is the whole professor thing. I've been an educator. I just finished my 24th year altogether of teaching. I've taught 7th grade, 9th and 10th grade. For 15 years, I was in public secondary schools in Delaware, and the past 9 years, I've been a college professor, always teaching English.
Right.
Reading and writing.
So I did not get an opportunity to read your book due to the, kind of the short notice nature of getting you on here. But I did get the opportunity to read some of your essays and things like that, and some of the short stories that you've published on various magazines and things. So obviously horror is kind of a wide, category in terms of genre. It's got all these types of subgenres. You got your horror slasher, splatter punk, gothic, and all these other categories. You seem to be, inspired mostly by like you said, obviously the Edgar Allan Poe stuff. So the more classic literary styles and things. Is there something about Edgar Allan Poe in particular that has captured your interest over all these years, or?
I mean, it's just Poe. So Poe, we all got exposed to, at least I hope so, as fairly young children, and the Raven, the haunting words of the Raven. I mean, the title of my book, Darkness There, But Something More, is also directly in homage to Darkness There and Nothing More, a line from the Raven. And the reason that I did it that way is to pay tribute, but also because my main character has gone through a tough time. She lost her baby, she went through a divorce, and so there's been a lot of darkness, but there is that quest for hope. There's that quest for something better, and I like that message a lot. When you look at Poe, and I've done quite a bit of study. I'm not a Poe scholar. I can't claim that title,
right,
but I appreciate Poe. I would say I'm a Poe aficionado, maybe, and he's just, a lot of darkness there. And when you look at his life was just almost as dark, if not darker, than a lot of his work. And still, there was just that intrigue, that pull as he draws you in. And I hope you've seen the Netflix series based on Poe's stories. I'm blanking out. Oh my gosh, what was it? Fall of the House of Usher. Did you
Right.
watch that?
I have not. I'm way behind on TV, and I usually wait for shows to just not even be running anymore to watch them and stuff. But I did watch The Following a little bit, and then I jumped off in like season
I
one.
watched
But
that.
did did
Yeah,
you?
that was, I feel like that was about 10 years ago. So,
Yeah, so that tells you how far behind I am with my TV there.
but I do recommend Fall of the House of Usher because for anybody who's even a little bit of a Poe fan, there are some fun, obvious references. But then for people who are pretty serious Poe fans, there are a lot more Easter eggs to uncover in a sometimes weird and often fun modern way. But I was very happy with the adaptation. I
Right,
thought it was just a lot of fun. And I thought, geez, hopefully this will make people want to read a book that has to do with an Edgar Allan Poe scholar when it comes out.
right.
The
No,
timing didn't quite line up, but it is what it is.
right. So as far as your book goes, it looks, you did get published and everything. How was it working with the publisher that put your book out there?
I mean, it was good. It's something that I guess that I always thought of, and for many, many years, I had imagined myself getting published, getting a book contract, and all of that. And I guess I never really looked past the acceptance. And even in my MFA program, I just finished my MFA program recently. Even with that program, it was always push, push, push to get to the place where somebody says, yes, I will publish you. And so there were some surprises along the way. It was interesting, the collaboration, the fact that it went through here. I think of myself, oh, I'm this editor as well as the professor.
Right,
I've done quite a bit of editing, but of course, you can't edit yourself the way, or you can't catch all the errors. You can't copy edit yourself
right,
the way somebody else. And I think one of the things that really I got stuck along the way in my writing career, which wasn't a career at the time because I just wasn't published for the longest time. I pretty much wrote into a vacuum. I wrote and I would send it off to an agent or a small publisher, and then I would just get rejected. And it's because I think I never looked for a community, a writing community around me, to actually have some sort of feedback exchange. And so it was just me writing, me reading and revising and editing, but then nobody else actually giving me feedback.
right,
And so in my classes and with my writing friends who are still trying to get that push to actually put their work out there, I tell them, don't write into a vacuum. Get feedback, make changes. And I always say to the writers that I edit, many of whom are my students, I say, you're the boss here. You're the creator. You ultimately get to decide. You don't have to listen to all of my feedback,
right,
but you absolutely, or at least you don't have to act on all of my feedback. You should listen to it. You should think about it, consider it, and we'll go from there.
right. Uh,
And I'm trying very much to take that advice myself.
right. I like that. You're kind of dismantling the whole trope that those who can do and those who can't teach by
Yeah.
getting out there and being a doer. So I appreciate you kind of, that's a myth that I learned from my dad, but
It,
also
it
haven't done
absolutely is.
it.
Yeah.
But
And I mean, again, being an educator is a huge part of my life.
yeah,
And if I had to claim two titles, educator and writer are really both giant parts of my identity. And
right,
so they very much overlap because I teach writing. I have always taught writing in some capacity. It's only been in the last year that I've taught creative writing at the college level, but I've always taught composition at least. And so there's always that dismantling, demystifying, breaking things down. And just to me, one of my big things is, and I follow this advice too, as well as tell people, I say, just get words on the page.
yeah,
They don't have to be perfect. They don't even have to be good. But if there's nothing on the page, you can't work with it.
Right.
If there's something on the page, you can always make it better. And for me, that is a huge relief because right now I'm trying to work on well, I'm not trying to, I am working on a new project and I'm trying to do 1,000 words a day.
Right.
And let me tell you, sometimes things go smoothly. Sometimes it is torturous, but I just tell myself I can make this better later.
Right.
Get the words on the page.
So I'm, I kind of on a similar journey there too, because I also write, and it took me probably about 10 years, but I finally did complete my first novel, and it's not, I'm not ready to do anything with it yet, but the only thing that got me through it, because I've been working on it for 10 years, and then the bulk of it I wrote in the last year. And the only way I muscled my way through it was just, like you said, I sat down and I forced myself to do, on my hour lunch breaks at work, I would write every day, and I'd get 500 to 1,000 words.
Wow.
Yeah, right. I was just crunching and not worrying about and kind of trying to reach that flow state thing.
Right.
And after a while, it kind of became like a habit almost. And now I do it every day. So to hear other people say it, that's what's worked for them as well is kind of inspiring because, like you said, if you don't sit down and write, then you're not getting anything done. Right. And you can't be so focused on, that moment that you're working on, just, get through it and let the creative process take over. It's in there somewhere, so.
I personally think I'm a much better reviser than I am a first drafter.
Right.
I never wear headphones and they keep falling out.
Oh, you're fine.
So I keep trying to put them back in. I don't know what's wrong with my ears that they won't stay in. Oh no, they're too big or too small. I don't know, but that's what I'm doing. I'm pushing them back in.
Oh, you're fine.
So when I write again, I love being done with my writing. I love hitting that word count or whatever my goal was for that day. But sometimes I feel that it takes so much out of me.
Yeah.
But when I revise, and I think that that's partially because even though it's my own work, I can read somebody else's writing and oftentimes pinpoint, okay, this is missing. This is repetitive. This is too much. This isn't enough. And so in a way, I try to slide into that editor role when it is my own writing, even though I'm not entirely an objective editor,
right.
Of course, when it's my own. I've done quite a bit of editing. I used to be the fiction editor of River and South Review, which is a literary magazine run by Wilkes University, which is where I got my MFA.
Mm-hmm.
And in my horror scholar role, this just recently came out. It is a volume. It's called No More Haunted Dolls, horror fiction that transcends the tropes. And so what's cool about this is that it is horror scholarship. I have 14 different writers from 7 different countries who all answered my call for chapters with different takes on both film and literature and even video games and how certain works did or didn't transcend tropes. I heard you say trope earlier.
Yep.
I love horror tropes.
I
think they're great.
Yep.
But I just want something more. And so my thing, Haunted Dolls are one of these like, oh my gosh, come on. It's the same story every time. But it can be a really fun story as long as they're doing something different. So I really enjoy layers to a horror story. I enjoy strong character development. I enjoy a good plot that has some unexpected twists where they make sense instead of they're just totally dumb and revealed at the very end.
Right.
But I don't know whether it's academic writing or creative writing. I have a knack for finding some things and letting people know how they can be better. And sometimes people listen.
Right.
And sometimes.
No, it's always good when people are, paying attention to the coursework there and everything. So speaking of tropes and things like that, one of the essays I read from yours was about like recycled plot lines and things, which is one of the sort of topics I put a lot of emphasis on in this YouTube channel as I follow these literary rabbit holes, and how one book will lead to another, and how another author's work was inspired by another, and like you had made mention of Stephen King and uh, The Monkey's Paw. And I can't remember which book you were talking about from Stephen King, but it wasn't the book that I had, which was because he's used that, Monkey's Paw storyline more than one time in more than one work. Because in Pet Sematary, I can't remember which one you said, but
I think I said The Rat, or it was just called Rat. I forget what book that was in. It was a book that If It Bleeds.
Right.
I think I referenced that.
So, so my dogs are chewing on a squeaky toy in the background.
I was guessing that was a joke.
Throw something at them real quick. So, anyway, like I said, one of the main focuses of this channel is to kind of go down those rabbit holes and figure out what inspired authors. And sometimes I think people get caught up on trying to be the most original writer or things like that, when they might actually be better off kind of leaning into those influences that they have, and obviously not plagiarizing them, but twisting them and making their own. And I think when you have an actual understanding of what your influences are, instead of just and being consciously aware of them, and not just trying to repress your influences and live in a vacuum, then I think you're actually capable of creating stronger work, because you know what you're doing on a more conscious level, and an understanding of the formula that was used. And I find that with musicians a lot, right? Where all music kind of falls into a formula, and you can sort of craft a certain type of song, and that's what makes it fit into a category or a genre, is that it follows these steps and it has these elements. And unfortunately, that can be kind of binding, I guess, and sort of put you in a box, because if you want it to be a Wendigo story, well, then it has to have a Wendigo, or something that resembles one. So it was really cool to read some of your essays and kind of see that. And I also got to read 2 of your short stories, which were both kind of those I know what you did type of stories.
What did you read?
I'm trying to.
I know I have a bunch of them.
So let me look. There was one where I remember the plot lines. I have them written down over here, but to the sea, or something, from the sea to the sea.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay. And I really liked that one because, and I don't want you to interpret this as any kind of knock or whatever, but because of the topic that we're on. I made a King reference. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Creepshow, which is the sort of a short story.
I did see it, but probably like in the 90s, though.
Yeah. So
not exactly.
Fair enough. But it also has a story in there that focuses on somebody, a spirit of vengeance kind of sucking somebody back into the ocean. And I had a light bulb moment with that piece, and I thought that was really cool, just because here you are talking about King and these type of plot lines, and then within your own work there's some of that. But again, your clear original spin on it with the motivation of the characters and things like that are all unique and stuff to your writing and your style. So I thought those were really excellent. So I was glad that you shared those with me.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I don't actually remember that Stephen King story. I mean, I might have read it. I don't know. Is it a short story first and then it was in the movie? Or?
So all of the stories in that movie, I believe, were written specifically for the film.
Okay.
But Stephen King, he recycles his own stuff over and over and over again. So I'm sure there's something that he's written that may have resembled it that I missed. I've read a few of his books, but
I've read, I would say, most of them, at least the ones written by under his own name versus Richard Bachman. I don't think I've read too many of those. I haven't read much Stephen King in the past several years, or the past couple years, because now so many of the writers I'm reading are the indie horror writers.
Yeah.
And so my thing is that I would rather support, I mean, not that I I'm not supporting Stephen King. I don't
Right.
have a problem with Stephen King, but I would rather support the little authors and tell them, "Hey, I read your book," versus Stephen King, who, with all of his fans, doesn't really care.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but I will tell you, last summer, how that story did originate is that last summer I had a plan. I'd already had a number of short stories, and I was trying to create a collection, which is coming out. I just got these stickers today. It's backwards, but I do have a short horror story collection, Keeper of Corpses and Other Dark Tales, that is coming out from Velix Books on Friday, September 13th. And if there was ever a cooler date to have a horror collection come out than Friday the 13th, I don't know what that would be.
Yeah.
Maybe if it was Halloween, maybe. But so I'm very excited about that. But so I knew that I was getting closer to having a full collection. And so I had a goal for myself last summer that I wanted to write 10 new short stories, and I wanted to get my collection to at least 60,000 words.
Right.
So From the Sea to the Sea was one of those short stories. And I remember sitting down, the only idea I had, and a short story I really do build around a seed of an idea.
Right.
And I say, okay, what can I do here? And I am very much a pantser. A lot of times I will sit down, I will have only a vague idea of where I'm going, and I kind of say, okay, let me try something. Let me try this. Okay, that didn't work. Delete, start over, go a
Right.
different direction. But From the Sea to the Sea, the only thing I knew when I sat down was that there was going to be a drowning.
Right.
And the reason I came up with that is that many years ago in Mexico, I almost drowned. I can swim. I grew up with a pool. I was a lifeguard at Wildwater Kingdom. And but I'm not an ocean kind of a
Yeah.
lifeguard swimmer.
Yep.
And I was walking in Cabo San Lucas, and there are these two beaches, Lovers Beach on one side, Divorce Beach on the other side. And they say, don't swim unless you're really, really like an Olympic swimmer. Don't swim on Divorce Beach. I had no intentions of swimming there. I was just walking around. I was holding my pair of shoes, and a wave came and grabbed my shoes. And I just, hey, turn, go to get my shoes. And the wave came and grabbed me.
Yeah.
And I really thought I was going to drown. And so, what I knew sitting down to write that story was that there was going to be a drowning.
Right.
Everything else came after it. And the crazy thing is that I was going to write it in Mexico because that's where I almost drowned. But I had some other stories, not that Mexico is South America.
Right.
I had a few other short stories that took place in South America, one in, I forget where, one in Chile, one in Ecuador, no, Bolivia. And so I thought, I don't want to have something in Mexico. And so I ended up choosing Greece. I've been to Greece. But then what was weird is that the theme of that story, I realized, oh my gosh, this is so Greek. The whole thing with mother-daughter conflict,
Right.
that's so Greek. So it all it came together in a way that I was happy about, and that I think sort of did transcend tropes, which is my whole thing.
Right. No, that's excellent. And that's kind of exactly what I was talking about with your own personal experiences and stuff. Kind of, even if it does sort of mirror something that's, because that's going to happen. But what makes it unique and interesting is that there's, your personal experience and your personal touch within the story and within the plot and the characters and the setting and all these things. So, and just to be totally clear, the resemblance is on in slight framework only, right? Like everything else is totally different. It's just, it was an element that stood out to me simply because of, your previous essay work that I had read before. So that's one of the things that, inspires me to even do this, is figure out what makes people tick and what's inspired them. And not all of their influences are going to be of like literary influences, right? They're going to be real life stuff too that kind of works its way in there. And there's a part of that, I guess, where maybe experience strengthens your ability to write things sometimes too. Not to discourage anybody who hasn't lived yet, I guess, but I think that's part of the journey though. So
yeah, I mean, what I always say about horror, these things do not want to stay in my ears, but I always say to my students, as they're writing their own horror stories is that, we have all of these different fantastical elements. You have zombies or something. You have these ghosts. You have some things that do not seem real.
Right.
And so to try to get the reader into that suspension of disbelief, you have to give them enough that is real.
Yeah.
If I start with, oh, a zombie is eating my head, and it just sounds stupid, well, then I'm not capturing my reader.
Yeah.
Now, I like zombies.
Yep.
I have only written one zombie story ever.
Right.
I don't think I could write a whole novel about zombies. But that to me is the beauty of the short story, is that you just get to get in there, mess around, and get out, and you don't have to sustain that for 60,000 plus words.
Right.
So a lot of short stories are about 2,500 words. And I just think that's a great length. You can sink your teeth into a story. Thinking about zombies right now.
Right.
Sink your teeth into a nice, juicy intestine or something of a story, but it's enough.
Yeah.
But it makes me feel free to try some different things that I wouldn't necessarily try to do in a longer piece.
Right. Now, I actually really am glad to hear you say that, because short stories are something I kind of put off for a long time, and then have sort of discovered within the last 2 years or so. And I have this tendency to go like way back in time. So I've been reading stuff from like Algernon Blackwood. That's why I made the Wendigo reference. That's fresh on my brain. And some of these really old, creepy English dudes.
Mhm.
And
M.R. James?
I don't know.
No.
I have another one that
You
I'm
could-
about to be doing named Bierce, I think. But he's actually an American guy.
Yeah, Ambrose Bierce.
Yeah. I just bought
No,
a collection of his stuff that I'm about to be reading too. So,
I know The Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. That was a story that I used to teach. Not horror, but as I would say horror adjacent,
Yeah.
has some horrific elements.
Yep.
That used to be a story that I taught when I taught high school.
Right on. So it's, like I said, it's kind of exciting to hear you say that, because there's something about these short stories, and a lot of them in my side are sci-fi too, but there's something about these short stories where I think you nailed it exactly, is that there's only so much world building you can do. There's only so much character development you can do, and if it's going to capture you or scare your audience, if that's what you're after, or be frightening in some kind of way, then it has to come together quickly, right? Because when you put it down and you pick it back up, and you put it down and you pick it back up, you lose some of it, right? Or as the writer yourself, you lose kind of maybe that initial thing that really kind of terrified you when you sat down to start working on it, and it develops and becomes this whole other thing. So I've really fallen in love with short stories over the past year for exactly what you're talking about. It's been a fantastic journey for me reading wise. So, but there's also something to be said about knocking a whole novel out there and doing that thing too. So,
yeah. I will tell you, I am definitely I'm starting, well, I'm about 22,000 words into a novel right now. And it is, to me, a lot harder than my journey last summer, just writing short story after short story.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to get through this and then reward myself next summer by doing short stories. So
right.
For me, with my job being what it is, and I'm always reading a million essays and short stories and whatnot, and giving so much of my brain focus on other people's writing, it's hard for me to do my own creative writing during the semester.
Right.
That's why now that I'm not teaching right now because it's summer, like, okay, my job is writing right now.
Yeah.
So I can knock out a short story or two during the semester, but I don't really have the focus to devote myself to a novel.
Right. It's well, I mean, you did get it done though. You did accomplish that, and so I'm glad to see that you have that release that's out, and I do plan on reading it, because it does look interesting, and it's going to be part of my Edgar Allan Poe journey, which I have not
Right.
given Poe my full attention yet. I have a tendency to stay away from like the masters and things that I don't watch. I used to not watch classic movies because I don't like to be influenced by the
Mainstream.
best, and so I've watched a lot of
Right.
B-rate garbage, and I realized after watching some Martin Scorsese stuff that I'm like, yeah, I think I'm missing out on
Yeah.
good movies and
Well,
good books, So, uh,
I love horror movies. Horror movies are just kind of my go-to when I had a bad day. How
yeah,
can I feel better? Watch a horror movie.
yeah,
But and I will say that I will not turn down a movie because I haven't heard of the actors.
right,
However, I will look at the rating on IMDb.
right,
I haven't heard of any of these actors. That's fine. You got a 3.1? No.
yeah,
I'm just 3.1 out of 10. It's not going to do it for me.
yeah. Unfortunately,
So, and yeah,
I'm the way opposite end of the spectrum there. The lower the rating, the better for me. But
oh,
I'm starting to kind of
no,
climb out of that hole where I'm like
yeah,
that I've neglected to read and watch some really good stuff because of that
yeah.
desire to watch the worst of the worst. But
I do not have the desire to watch the worst of the worst.
yeah,
I have the desire to give things a chance.
yeah,
And also, a horror movie compared to, let's say, a drama. Overall, horror movies get much lower ratings. And so when it's a drama, if it's a 6, it's probably not very good.
right,
If it's a horror movie and it gets a rating of 6, you're like, okay, this is probably pretty good. And I don't know what that's all about. If people are just, maybe some non-horror fans are watching horror movies and don't understand the genre. I don't know, but I'll give a lot of movies a try. But I also am allowing myself now that I'm older and wiser to turn off a movie if I think it's horrible
yeah.
and just not suffer through to the bitter end.
Yeah, there's something to be said about. I think we've lost something along the way. I remember going to like video rental stores and stuff with my dad, and picking up the
Yeah.
VHS tapes and looking at the cover. And now with everything being online, I have watched movies and then I don't even remember that I just watched them. Like a couple weeks later, I'm like,
Oh,
wait, I've seen this, but
right,
but movies from
right.
my childhood, I can remember every word. So there's things are
And
changing.
even
Yeah,
I've bought a book. I've downloaded like an ebook of something and
yeah.
I'm reading it and I think, this sounds familiar. And then I go downstairs and I look in my bookcase. Oh, it sounds familiar because you read this book.
Yep. No, I haven't
And I'm
got
like,
I haven't gotten
funny.
there with books yet, but I could see
Oh,
that happening. The same thing
yeah.
because like the books I have, I keep on my shelf and everything, and those are the ones I intend to read for that exact reason. But I have gotten into ebooks, which has increased my uh, volume of reading, I guess. So
I am almost totally ebooks now.
yeah,
And I really resisted for a long time, but I'll tell you what it was. I was traveling somewhere and I had a stack of books. I was going to be gone for a couple weeks. I had a stack of books in my suitcase, taking up so much room. And then the lady on the plane next to me had an ebook, and I thought, uh.
yeah,
And so I have a lot of books. I cleaned out my bookcase quite a bit during the pandemic and regret some of the choices that I made. But man, ebooks, I don't even know how many I have. I've been probably reading them for at least 10 years. I must have over 1,000.
yeah.
And guess what? They all fit in my tiny little device. And so that's great.
Right. The one thing I could definitely say that is that they've given, now that books are more readily available electronically, it's allowed other people to enter the game and, get their content out there that, that may have not been feasible when everything was print and, self-publishing and everything. And there's a lot of people getting discovered and getting their stuff out there because it's accessible. And you can put your own price and stuff on it. So I won't knock it at all. I think it's great. It's not my preferred way of reading,
Right.
but I think it's absolutely a wonderful thing that, because I don't think there's any real fear that books themselves are going to go away, and whatever gets more people to read, I think the better. So if you have choices between one or the other, have at it. That's what I say.
Well, I have to say, something I have been shocked to see is how many of my college students are actually preferring to read paperback books
Yeah,
versus ebooks. I just assumed, okay, they've grown up with all this technology. No, and I see them pulling out. It's a beautiful thing to see before class sometimes. You see a number of students and they're sitting there. Some of them are on their phones, of course, but others are sitting there with a book,
Right.
reading a book.
Yep.
It's great.
Yep. It's fantastic.
Makes me happy.
I work in a
Educator.
factory, and I've been seeing more and more books populate, like that people are carrying around with them. I think it's just great escape from the screen life. You know what I mean? It's like you put your
Yeah.
you want to read to kind of escape that a little bit, and go in your quiet place or your zen place for a while, and to bring another screen with you into that sometimes is detrimental to that journey, I think, or not detrimental, but the opposite of what you're trying to do. So no,
Yeah,
it's great.
my brother works at Sam Adams, and so he says that on his break, he usually has a book. And when I first wrote my book, I said, "Oh yeah, I'll send it to you as a file." And he was like, can you print it out?"
Yeah.
What? Come on, you need it printed out. But he said that several people at work actually during their breaks will read physical books.
Right.
I thought,
It's great.
great.
So, as far as I had a lot of these topics that we covered sort of written down already, and I really just want to kind of give people a platform, because I know it's hard to promote your stuff out there, and every Facebook group and every Reddit post, and they all have rules against self-promotion and stuff, and you can put your stuff out there on Friday and that's it, and then there's 1,000 other people doing the same thing. So um, I'm just trying to build this channel up a little bit, and like you said, sort of support indie authors and people that are trying to get their work out there that don't necessarily have all those avenues. And I don't have a huge following, but it's I plan on growing this thing and continue to do this to help people get natural conversations and everything like that are fun, but also have a place to talk about their stuff that they might not be available through other things, because everything is considered spam now. So every time you share a link to your book or whatever, they call it spam. I know, it's got to be frustrating. Yeah.
And all the scammers then jump on you and start sending you DMs.
Yeah.
Oh, tell me about your writing journey.
Yeah.
So, no,
that's great.
You are a scammer.
Right. So I do appreciate your time and having you come on here. And if there's anything else that you wanted to share, or talk about, or mention your book one more time, and throw it up there. There it is.
I'll give you a little bit more about my book, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
I already mentioned that my main character is an Edgar Allan Poe scholar and college professor, and she's been through a rough time. But what happens, and this isn't giving spoilers away, this is pretty much what's on the back of the book. What happens is that she realizes she's stagnant where she is, and so she takes a different position. She has a tenured job and everything, which is hard to get in higher ed in this day and age. She takes a different position as a visiting professor at her alma mater, Blackthorn University. And so she is, and that's because her former professor had told her about the position, and okay, she needs a change. She needs something new. She needs something more after the darkness. So she's doing her thing. Things are going well. She's getting into the groove of her new position. And one of her favorite students goes missing and ends up dead. And so then she's drawn into the investigation. And then she starts thinking a lot about things that happened when she was a student there. So also some darkness. And so I have a dual timeline. One of the timelines is when Marissa is in the present as a college professor. The other timeline is in the past, in the late 90s, when she's a college student pledging a sorority. And so there's a lot of other stuff that I'm not going to get into regarding that, because those would be spoilers. And if I can just say a little bit more of my
sure,
my little tiny, look how cute it is. My stickers just came today. So Keeper of Corpses and Other Dark Tales is really quite a departure from my novel, because my novel is horror adjacent or dark suspense. Keeper of Corpses is very much horror, but it's not just one kind of horror. It's a lot of different stuff. So there is literary horror. There are some stories that are just bad. There are other stories that are pretty gruesome. And there are some that are actually kind of comical. So, for example, I have this one story, Not a Cat Guy, where this guy, Jason, who's kind of a bro, thinks that his girlfriend's cat is the reincarnation of her dead husband. And so I've really played around with how I ordered the stories because sometimes there's something really heavy, and then right after it, there's something kind of goofy.
Right.
So I'd like to think that I've run the gamut of a lot of different types of horror, and many of the stories take place in Blackthorn, Pennsylvania, which is actually the world of my novel. So I think that there's something for everybody who likes horror in some way, shape, or form in my short story collection, and it is available for pre-order now as an ebook for only $2.99. And I did the math, and that's just about 11 cents per story.
Right on. There you
I'd
go.
say that's a pretty yeah.
That's not bad. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So, thanks again for coming on.